In this lesson, we'll learn what vector graphics are and how they differ from raster or pixel-based graphics. Okay, so if you want to follow along with me in this lesson, feel free to check your project files and open the Lesson 2 Begin file. This is where we're going to start off. Now, in getting started learning about vector graphics, really there are a number of different applications out there that are intended to create and edit vector graphics. Now, we're going to be working through this course in Adobe Illustrator. It is one of the more popular vector applications, but really a lot of the principles that we're going to be talking about, a lot of the things are going to be fairly universal. So let's go ahead and in this lesson again talk about what exactly sets vector graphics apart from pixel or raster graphics. So let's go ahead and start with our pixel graphics. And in front of me here you see 3 images of a young woman. This is actually from one of our Photoshop courses. Now, Photoshop is another Adobe product, and it is intended for creating and editing pixel-based graphics. So a pixel-based graphic like this one here essentially is very similar to the type of file you might find on a digital camera, whether it be a camera that's part of your cell phone or whether it's a higher quality digital camera. Those devices record images in pixels, and here we have 3 different what are called resolutions of the same image. We have a higher resolution image, and if I were to say zoom in on her face here and we're to look at this, you can zoom in pretty far on this high resolution image and still not see any of the individual pixels. So if we were to continue to zoom in, maybe we zoom in really closely on her eye here. Now, zoomed in this close, you can see individual pixels here, and you can start to see sort of a jagged edge around things like her nostril here, kind of her eyelid. You can start to see how each of the pixels are layered in. So when a device captures this image in pixels, each pixel that's recorded is recorded at a different color. So all of these pixels, when they're assembled together, are very, very tiny. And depending on, again, the quality of the camera, it could capture literally millions of pixels. So with this higher resolution image, we get a fairly high quality image. But if we were to come over here to this image in the middle and kind of zoom in on her face again, hopefully you can see that there's a pretty drastic change here. You can see there's a drop in the number of total pixels in this image. We zoom in on her face and really you see pretty much nothing but pixels. A lot of that detail gets lost. Now again, if we were to even come over here a little bit further and look at this image on the far right, this lower quality image, this has the fewest pixels of the 3. So thus it is the lowest resolution image. In this image, we're really looking at the least amount of detail of the 3 because there's fewer images to represent that detail. Now, again, these are pixel-based or raster images. You might even hear the term bitmap thrown around. So these images are all created by assembling a number of pixels together. Now, what that number is affects the quality of the image, as you've seen in these 3 examples here. Now, vector graphics, on the other hand, are very, very different from a pixel-based graphic. Vector graphics don't use pixels to create an image. They use mathematical formulas, and we're not going to go into necessarily the technical aspect of the math behind a vector graphic, but the most important thing here, you can see, well, let's go and just take a look at this logo. So this is a very simple logo, a few puzzle piece type shapes, but I want you to notice if we were to say zoom in on a portion of this logo, we can continue to zoom in as far as possible and we're never going to see pixels. That's because this vector graphic is what's known as resolution independent, meaning it's not dependent on pixels to represent the image. So the beautiful part, or the beautiful thing about vector graphics, because they're resolution independent, they can be scaled up and they can be scaled down to really any necessary size without losing any quality. If you were to try and do that over here with one of these pixel-based images, let's say that this image was only maybe 6 inches by 6 inches at its native size, But we needed this to be poster size, something like, maybe 2 or 3 feet wide by that same size in height. We would have to try and create additional pixels for this bitmap image to try and fit that new format. And anytime you're trying to create pixels using a raster program like Photoshop, you're always going to get a less than desirable result, especially when you're trying to create a large amount of pixels that just don't exist. So the important thing to take from this conversation is that vector graphics are scalable. So this logo right here, we could take this same vector graphic and simply use it on a business card, or we could scale this up very, very large and we could use it on a billboard. We don't have to do anything other than resize or basically stretch this vector graphic out to fit the new format. So that's the beauty of vector images. Now, vector images aren't just used for logos. They are heavily used with logo design, almost exclusively with logo design. But they are also used to create much, much more complex images, like the one you see below here. This is actually an image from another one of our Illustrator courses. I believe the title of that course is Creating Photo-Inspired Vector Artwork, if you'd like to check that out. Now, if you're just getting started with vector artwork, that might be a little bit down the road for you. You may need to sort of ramp up and really look at a few of our other more introductory courses on Illustrator before you attempt to do this course. But the reason I'm showing you this now is because vector artwork consists of basically what I refer to as objects. So in this image, for example, you see this red splatter behind. Each one of these little red shapes is going to be an object. So I can come in here and I can click on these, and I can actually click and I can move these objects around, and I can reposition them. I can change these objects. We can do whatever we need to do with each one of these little bitty pink splatter shapes. Now, there are a number of objects contained in this entire image. We've got objects for each little highlight in her hair. We've got a handful of objects here for her mouth and her lips. So all of these objects working together create this image. So you can see here that the way a vector graphic is put together is very, very different at its core from the way a pixel-based graphic is put together. Now, all in all, there are a number of different components that you need to be familiar with if you're looking at getting into vector drawing. You need to know all the little components that make up what I refer to as a vector object. So at this point, let's go ahead and move on to the next lesson. And I'd like to go ahead and break down vector objects as simple as I know how. So let's go ahead and take a look at sort of the anatomy of a vector object.